right. Well, good morning, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to the business of podcasting. And this event is hosted by the African American Chamber of Commerce of Central Florida's Kissimmee Leads Group. Let me introduce everyone that's on the panel. And so we have our moderator, David Watson. He is the Leads Group president. How are you doing, David?
Good. Ready to keep going.
Yes, perfect. And then next we have Lavelle Monger Harris from RTW Photography. He is he also has a podcast, Velle's World Podcast. How are you, Lavelle?
Live and blessed.
Good. I'm glad to hear it. Next, we have on our lovely panel is Dr. Lane Powell with Tech Sassy Girls, the founder and executive director. And she also has a podcast called Tea and Bites Podcast. How are you?
Great. How are you? Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Next on our panel is Justin Williams, the general manager of Grand Bohemian Hotel Orlando, and also in charge of Black and Bougie Podcast. How are you, Justin?
Greetings and salutations. All good this morning, ready to go.
Good, I'm glad to hear it. And then last but not least is Jaslyn Ferguson with Jaslyn Markel Designs, and she has the podcast of Adventures of Datelando. How are you, Jaslyn?
I'm doing well and super excited to chat today.
Yes, I'm glad to hear it. Perfect. But this is our lovely panel that we have that's going to talk to you today, just to discuss the world of podcasting as a business owner. So I would like to give the reins over to David, and this is your show.
Awesome. Hello, everyone. Again, sorry for the rocky start, but that is the beauty of technology. And hopefully today we will learn some great tips on how to navigate some of those things so we don't have those type of issues in the future. But basically, if you're here today, at some point, you've taken into consideration sharing your experiences or passions with the world. In a time where physical interaction has become limited and speaking engagements have gone virtual, many are turning to the world of podcasting. Each one of these individuals are here today to share their experiences and how they got started and the things that they're doing to navigate. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to open up. I'm going to ask you guys a bunch of questions and get to know you a little bit better in regards to your podcast and how you got started. So Justin, I want to start with you. And this question is going to relate to everyone here on our panel. Justin, tell us how you got started in the world of podcasting.
For me, I started basically it was during COVID. Obviously, the hotel was closed for 3 months, and then George Floyd happened. And so I wanted to have a place where I could have a conversation and just stop neutralizing my Blackness, to be quite honest. I felt that in the world that I was in that I couldn't necessarily fully be myself. So it helped me to bring out just who I am and to bring out my own flavor and sauce. So I call it the Black and Bougie Podcast, which the way I market it out is with, the cars and the clothes and the luxuries. That's just really just to pull people in. But it really has some deep content, just talking about the Black experience. So what Black and Bougie means to me is powerful people that are upwardly mobile.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Lavelle, same question for you. What got you started?
So it's very interesting how life started off. I was a band geek in high school, along with everything else that I did. So I was always around music, used to rap in high school as well. One of the things that my mom told me when I started undergrad was that when I was rapping, I was a lot happier, and that was my form of expression. So as I got older and started transitioning from that environment that I was in, rapping doesn't seem too ideal for the type of things that I was doing. In 2000, I decided hey, let me use my public speaking skills. Let me use my theater skills that I learned with lighting and all this other stuff, audio. and audio engineering. Let me put it to work. So I made a post. And I was like, hey, I want to start a podcast. And and everybody was like, what? I was like, I think this is really going to be a way for me to branch out and allow people to hear me outside of posting statuses on Facebook, things of that nature. Really have a verbal platform so I can verbally express my feelings and thoughts about things. In June, my grandmother died. And then in July, my mom died. So it was a huge pause. And September came, which is my grandmother's and my mom's birthday month. They were born 4 days, and not born 4 days apart, but their birthdays was 4 days apart. And from there, my first episode was Dear Mother, and it was for my grandma and my mom, and it just took off from there. So it was really a way for me to kind of express myself. And I did more research, so I kind of learned how to be a podcaster along the way. So that's how I got started, and that's how where I'm at now.
Thank you so much for sharing. Again, very powerful. Wow. Jaslyn, how about yourself?
Yeah, so I actually host my podcast with another individual. Her name is Melissa Alonzo. She goes by M. Dot. And basically, I had worked with her for years. We were also friends. And, this was actually before COVID. We were both just kind of looking for a passion project to pour ourselves into. She mentioned that she'd always wanted to do a podcast, but that she just didn't know a topic to talk about. And me kind of always testing things out on social media, as that's part of my everyday work. I had realized just in kind of my own personal research that whenever I talked about things that had to do with dating, that, on my social media channels, a lot of people would either engage or watch my stories a lot more than my other content. So that was just a really interesting insight. So I said, what if we talked about dating? And we made that a podcast. And so she was all about it. And, from there, we just both decided to, figure out creative ways to kind of tell the story of dating in a lot of different ways. But yeah, it was just one day having lunch with a girlfriend and we said, let's do this.
Oh, wow. I can only imagine the type of stories that come from those experiences. Thank you so much for sharing. And last but certainly not least, Dr. Powell, how did you get started?
Good morning. Thank you so much for extending the invitation to be on this panel. I'm so excited to be here. Our story is really about thriving, forget surviving, right? So pandemic hits, we're running a nonprofit, we're teaching girls in middle and high school about science, technology, engineering, and math, and pandemic hits, and we have to figure out how do we still introduce STEM to these young ladies. And that caused us to pivot all of our programs virtually. And with that, we were just trying to figure out how to really engage the students and ensure that they could still consume content like everyone else, essentially. And so we started doing webinars, and from there, the podcast was born. If you know me, you know that I dream, and I'm a dreamer, and I dream big. And that was one of the ways for us to inspire our young ladies to be consistent and survive and thrive during these challenging times. So our podcast, 10 Bites with Dr. Lane Powell, is really focused on interviewing STEM professionals. And that's how we're able to engage our students and keep them informed about some of the hidden figures that are in our community.
That's excellent. As you can see, everyone, each one of these individuals has a passion, a story in which translated into them getting into the podcasting world. So something to take into consideration. Knowing what it took for you to get started, and I'm going to ask these questions individually. What advice would you give someone who is looking to start a podcast? And I'll ask that question to you, Lavelle. Any advice?
The biggest advice is listen to your heart. A lot of times, if you spread out the idea of creating a podcast to so many different people, that's definitely not familiar with podcasting. They'll tell you, don't nobody want to listen to you. Why do it? That topic is not important, things of that nature. You're too old for it, or you're too young for it. You're not cool enough. And it can become very discouraging. So what I did was, when I made the call, my mind was already made up. My heart was already made up to go forward to it. reach out to individuals that you know that are podcasting so that you can save on money, because it can get expensive if you rebuying things, or if you do have the money, it's probably best for you to go to a studio. That's a possible option. I wish I could have had a co-host, because a lot of the times I'm speaking with myself in an audience of I don't know who, and speaking with someone, I realize that when I do have a guest, it's a nice flow. So making sure that when you do create those flows, that the relationship is there, and that you all understand that when we on this podcast, although we are friends in real life, we are characters on this podcast, and we have a job to do and to complete. And I think that's very important. I did see someone ask about the type of software that's being used. Use what's comfortable for you. I know some people that make podcasts off Zoom. I know some people that make podcasts off the Anchor app and use their phone. I know there's different ways. Because I do have an audio engineering background, I was able to get, the type of equipment that I was comfortable using with, and still learning how to use it. So the biggest advice to other people that want to get into this, find your heart, make your mind up, and then start exploring opinions from others, and really just do it.
Wise words. I'm actually going to piggyback off of something that you said, which is, do you ever feel like you have to dodge topics you otherwise want to discuss, but fear of backlash or brand tarnishing? It may interfere with your business as a whole. Is that something that bothers you or is a worry? Justin, I'll leave that question for you, especially with the podcast that you picked to pursue.
Yeah, that's a great question, because my podcast is called The Black and Bougie Podcast, and to be quite honest, Orlando it's not portrayed as an Atlanta or DC or one of these meccas where that's just a term that you can throw out and it would mean absolutely nothing. So it was in the thought process when I said, okay, do I want to do this? Yeah, I want to do it. Why? Because I am Black and I consider myself bougie. And whoever doesn't like it, this is my personal life. But what it has done in the reverse is I've had so many people that are not of the darker hue that listen to the podcast, and they're starting to learn things and really embrace the culture and become allies of the culture based off of the conversations and topics that I'm having. So it was still a little bit of an issue. I do sometimes dodge topics that I think may be a little bit too deep. But then I think about 2 weeks ago, I said, I'm not doing it. I actually recorded one episode on post-traumatic stress disorder in our community. And I was like, man, this is dark and this is deep. And so it was just sitting there. So I'm releasing it tomorrow, because I think it's something that needs to be discussed. So nothing is off limits right now, because this is the platform that's there for it.
Great. Thank you again for sharing that. I'm going to turn to Dr. Powell, because I look at you as a problem solver. When I think of you, that's what comes to mind. So with that being said, is there anything that has thrown you for a loop, anything unexpected that has come out of podcasting since you started your podcast?
Thank you for those kind words, David. What has thrown me for a loop? That's a great question. But before I answer that, I wanted to go back to what advice would you give to someone looking to start a podcast? I think it's important for you to understand what makes you unique in the marketplace. What would make someone go to Apple or Spotify and download your episodes and listen to you for an hour or 20 minutes or however long your show is? And I would also say to think about how you think that people really give much thought to the frequency of the show, how long the episodes are going to be, and how you're going to sustain it. So for me, the aha moments were in two places. It was editing and marketing. And I had no idea how long editing would take. And again, with me starting this podcast, I had to figure everything out on my own. I did a lot of research online and talked to a couple of folks who had podcasts to see how they were sustain their podcasts, and just a lot of research, just figuring out what software to use, what equipment to get, how we're going to edit this. So in our research, I found that you have to use the software that's comfortable for you, like Lavelle mentioned, but also try to automate things. So I use a lot of Zaps that help with scheduling and booking guests on the show, and just making things that aren't necessarily something that you're thinking about on a consistent basis. But with the automations and with these Zaps, I don't have to think about, when a guest books my show, whether I have to send them the link to what platform I'm using to record, or whether they have the tips that I've sent them on, making sure that the podcast audio quality is right, or the lighting is right, et cetera. So there are a lot of steps that you really have to think about when you're producing an episode. Post-production is a bear. And I would say to everyone who is thinking about starting a podcast, first of all, just do it. Your voice needs to be shared and heard with the world. And secondly, really put some thought behind marketing and post-production, because those are the two things that are going to take the most time.
I'll actually expound on marketing, because that is probably one of the biggest killers of someone who is looking to start a podcast or have started one and looking to maintain a level of success. Jaslyn, when it comes to marketing, what are your recommendations on how to go about it?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because, Datelando, or Adventures of Datelando, the podcast, like I said, was really a passion project for both my podcast co-host and myself. And when we went into it, it was with the mindset that we were this perfect duo, because, obviously by day, I do marketing, I do graphic design, digital marketing for a living. And then my co-host, actually, she is in sales, but also has, dabbled with audio production and things like that. So we were like, this is a match made in heaven. And with that, of course, I took on a lot of the marketing tactics. And even as somebody who lives in marketing, I will say that, you really do have to invest a lot of time and do your research in figuring out, how you want to, reach out to people, or to make sure that your podcast is discoverable. And so with that, there's a host of different things you can do. But one of the key things I will say that we really found some success with was actually, finding a balance and kind of branching outside of even just the digital space, right? Because, you really want people to listen to your podcast, and that some people will discover you online. But I think a really good tactic to always keep in mind is to think of your audience, first as humans, and to say, while it's, great to be on social media and to be online, if you are primarily trying to target, especially a local crowd like Datelando is, that it's important to also take that into consideration. So we actually did a lot of kind of tactics that were in person as well. And again, we got started before COVID. So things are a little different now, obviously, but one of the really great things that we were able to do was just to get creative. So we thought to ourselves, how are we going to put ourselves in front of an Orlando audience to say, hey, here's a podcast that you should listen to. And so we really thought, okay, we identified who's our audience. Okay, it's young people, it's millennials, it's, people who are trying to navigate the dating scene and to figure out what that looks like for them. And so where do we find these people? And we're like, okay, this is probably going to be people who are at different, local events. And so then we asked ourselves, how do we interject ourselves into these local events as a marketing tactic? And what we ended up doing was just basically just investing in some, basic software to, convert our iPads into a photo booth. We got a stand, a ring light stand, and we did have to do some investing into some backdrops and things. But we ended up kind of using this traveling photo booth as a way to approach different events and ask them, hey, listen, if you need a photo booth for your event, we'll do that, completely for free, right? So we're kind of giving them this value proposition. But in return, we knew that what we were getting was invaluable, right? We were getting in front of people. We were also making it a requirement that if they use the photo booth, they had to fill out, certain information like their email address. And it also gave us an opportunity to encourage them to listen to our podcast, but also to follow us on social media. And so with that, we had really great results, and it was really great to be able to build an email list early on, because that really allowed us to then, be able to message people whenever we dropped new episodes. And we knew that these were people that had kind of seen us in person and had a curiosity kind of born out of that of what's this podcast all about. Now, again, COVID changed a lot of things. And, because this podcast truly is or has been a passion project and kind of a side project in many ways, that was definitely really hard for us because we were seeing success and relying so heavily on these in-person events. And we were like, great, this is what we're going to keep doing. So we've definitely had to switch gears, and you'll see that was really our in-person events marketing was really what we did for season 1. We're gearing up for season 2. We haven't rolled it out just yet, but that's coming soon. But with that, you'll see that we are relying a lot more on social media and trying to really be intentional with our Instagram account, to make sure that we are going in and not only creating beautiful posts that say, hey, here's what our episode is, but really being intentional with who we follow, and the accounts that we interact with, and looking at different hashtags of people who we say, okay, if this is the audience that we want to follow us, what are the hashtags that they're following? Looking at those hashtags, looking at people who interact with those hashtags, following them, and so forth. And so really kind of digging our heels into that kind of traditional Instagram approach at this time. But what I would say to people is that there's so many ways to go about it. I think the photo booth example is just the prime example of get creative, and don't feel that there's one way to go about this. Just because podcasts, people listen to them online, doesn't mean that that's your only space to advertise it. You definitely want to just think, from a common sense level, how do I get this in front of the people that I want to listen to it?
Got it. So stay consistent, be creative, and be able to pivot when things don't work out one way.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to go with one more technical question. I kind of wanted to get some of the questions that revolved around the issues, the things that may make you hesitate when it comes to creating a podcast. This question I'll reserve for Lavelle because it's something that we spoke on about a week ago. Lavelle, when it comes to what's important, which would you say is more important? Quality content or quality equipment?
That's a hard question. So
you already been prepped for this, man.
Yeah, and I say it's hard because you can create some amazing things using Zoom. We're using your cell phone now. So the quality is there, but the quality can be the biggest turnoff if it's done wrong, right? Because you only have one outlet. People can't see anything. All they can do is listen. So if you got crackles, if you have random stuff coming in the background, it can easily distract the listener, and they like, okay, yeah, I'm not gonna mess with it. I have, for you all to know out there that usually when people create podcasts, if you last more than 9 episodes, you are already over the hump of a lot of people. They don't make it towards 9 episodes because the viewership or the quality is just not there. The content is important because the quality can be good is life. But if you're not talking about anything for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, hour, 2 hours, you just wasting somebody's time and they're not going to come back. I think quality is easier to obtain with the technology that's out here, with the resources, but the content is what's going to drive and continue to bring people in. So if you're talking about nothing for 30 minutes, an hour, 9 times 10, those individuals not going to return. But if you have one episode that may be messed up with quality because you tried something new, you can apologize, you can recover from that. It's hard to recover from bad content.
Yeah, and David, the only thing I would add to that is, there are tons of tools and resources available as a podcaster. So I'm not a big proponent of free tools, and I think it's because I'm in the tech space, and I know that when you use free tools, understand that you are the product. So whatever you develop, whatever content you're putting out, it's not yours, essentially, right? So I'm very conscious about that. And so we look for tools that have a subscription base, and that has been able to help us in a lot of different ways. And I'm not sure if the audience is aware of a software called Descript, but that really helps with editing your podcast and really cutting down on post-production as well. So that goes to the quality and the content that Lavelle was just talking about. And another software that we use to edit our podcast is Otter. So Otter will essentially take your audio and transcribe that content for you. And when you're thinking about marketing, when you're thinking about what you're posting on social media and things like that, it's very easy to grab that content and then make a post about it or share a clip of it as well. And one of the things that I love about Descript as well, and I don't work for any of these companies, so please, this is not it, but from a person who's not an audio engineer, who's never done a podcast before prior to now, and who edits all of her content, these are the things that have made my life so much easier. So I want to share that with you all. So if you decide to start a podcast, you're not starting from scratch like I did. But Descript and Otter are the two that I would recommend. And as I mentioned, what I love about Descript, it will transcribe your audio too, but it'll also edit your video if you're editing a webinar, for example.
That's good content to know. We'll definitely need to follow up with you on that because, yeah, definitely not an audio engineer, and I would be completely lost. So it sounds like you're the person to turn to.
It's not that hard.
It's not that hard, yeah. There's someone who has a background in engineering.
Right, I am clutching my pearls right now.
Justin, going back to content, do you ever find it difficult to stay consistent with presenting a message, with producing episodes at any point in time? And how consistent are you with posting?
Yeah, it's time. I mean, you have to put time into it. So I could say I started it as a passion product, but then it turned into a business. And to be quite honest, I wasn't expecting that to happen. It was really just supposed to be a therapeutic place for me to just kind of get my thoughts out. And then all of a sudden you get people that start listening and subscribing, and it's like, okay, I got to put out another one and I got to do another one. And then you start listening to the one you did before, and it's like, okay, I don't want to just kind of rant. So I've got to make sure that there's a theme that can kind of flow in what I'm talking about so people can follow. But I say all that, I still don't want to scare people away from doing it because it just depends on what level that you want your podcast on. If you don't really care about, hundreds or thousands of people following, and it's just something that you want to do as a hobby, you can do that. But if you want to take it serious, you're going to have quality content and quality equipment. I don't think one is greater than the other. You essentially are the content. So I would assume that you as the person and the product, you're going to be quality. So you're going to just need the equipment to match the quality content that you're going to be putting out. But also know that if you are going in that lane where you want your podcast to be on the next level, your visuals, your marketing, everything has to be spot on because it's representing you. It's representing, what you want to put out. So you just have to be mindful of all those things.
And then can I add, podcasting is getting very competitive. So it's not like you're the only one doing it. Honestly, before I started, I had 3 other close friends that did podcasts, and they didn't make it past that 9-episode threshold because of their heart wasn't into it, their mind wasn't into it, the quality wasn't into it. they just couldn't keep it up. So I just hit my 30 episode and I got 3,000 downloads. And they looking at me like, how did you do it? I'm just being consistent. I gave, the first half of me, the first 15 episodes was me giving my heart to the people, not really knowing how to be a podcaster, not really marketing anything, reaching out to my circle on Facebook, the people that I know. And now I have people listening that I don't even know. And people are DMing the page. They sending emails, thanking me, random text messages from family members like, man, I knew you your whole life. And I never knew that happened to you. I never knew about that experience. So again, just really figuring out where you are and where you want to go. Because that next level is different. Like when I was doing it for fun, it was fun. I was talking for 2 hours, not caring. And people were still listening. Now I shorten the episodes down because I'm becoming a podcaster and people like, thank you. And I had to realize that essentially I'm my listener. I'm a young Black millennial entrepreneur, leader in the community, whatever community I'm in, I find some type of leadership role. And I don't have 2 hours to waste on listening to a podcast. I'm usually listening to podcasts when I'm in the commute from home to work, home to meeting, home to this. And so now I've learned that that's the best way to make my content, to make my podcast so that people can listen on the way to work. Will I listen to a 2-hour podcast? Probably not. So why would I force someone else to listen to me for 2 hours?
That's a great perspective to take into consideration. All right, I'm gonna do a quick rapid fire question. Give me a short answer, 30 seconds or less.
You can't ask podcasters to give you a short answer.
Do your best, because I know we're trying to pack a lot of content in for our listeners. So tell me, and this is gonna be a question for everyone here. Name a dream podcast guest that you would like to have on and why.
Jay-Z.
Go ahead.
Jay-Z. Oh, you said rapid fast. I thought it was rapid fire. Jay-Z, and really just share some of his entrepreneurial spirit coming from the streets to where he is now. I think that's very impactful from an individual of my background and the individuals that I want to inspire.
Jay-Z. Oh. Jaslyn, how about yourself?
So for me, it would probably be, I would say Matt James, who was the most recent and contestant on the show The Bachelor, and was their first Black male contestant to host or to be the Bachelor of the show. Keeping this quick simply just because of the fact that for Datelando, we tried to use dating as a platform to kind of talk about other topics. And with his season, it was really interesting because, the topic of race came up a lot because actually the contestant that he ended up selecting ended up coming out that on her social media she was racist. And so that was a really interesting, kind of dynamic there. So I'd love to have him on, but I will say definitely stay tuned because in season 2, we do actually have somebody from the Bachelor franchise. So stay tuned.
It wasn't me.
I would, if I had a chance to talk to him, I would ask, how did you get on? If I was a single man, how did you get on the show?
Thank you for the disclaimer.
I had to.
Be careful.
How about you, Dr. Powell?
Hands down, Michelle Obama. Oh my gosh, who does not love her, first of all, and her passion and fervor for educating girls and getting them to change the world? I'm here for all of it.
I can't agree with you more. She is the bomb. And I think Tanisha in our chat agreed with you as well. Justin, who you got for me?
So I would like to moderate a conversation between Oprah Winfrey, who's on the high end, and then there's another podcaster out there named Kevin Samuels, who is very, very controversial. He loves talking about, high value men, and he's, I don't want to give too much to his. I think there will be a very interesting conversation when you have someone with his point of view that talks to a high value woman like Oprah Winfrey. I think some good content could come from that.
Yeah, you got to look them up to understand the labs behind that. But those are great subject matters to definitely bring on. Let me ask another feel-good question. you're at the height or pinnacle of your success with your podcast, if you're not already there, tell me, what does that look like for you? And I will give that one to Dr. Powell. I want to hear you.
Wow, that's a great question. I think for me, we're successful now. And I say that because we've started. A lot of times fear allows people to start them from doing anything. And to those that are thinking about starting a podcast, just do it. Just do it, number one. But the pinnacle of success for us would be for us to hire, recruit, and retain our youth who are in Tech Sassy Girls and STEM Icons, our new program for Black and Hispanic boys, to actually run the production of the Tea and Bites podcast with Dr. Lane Powell from beginning to end.
That's a great answer. Great answer. Anybody else want to chime in on that? In just a minute, I'm going to open up the floor for questions from our audience. I'll give about 10 minutes for that. But anybody else want to chime in on that?
I'd like to chime in. Just echoing what Dr. Powell said, I think really, it's so important for people to know to get started. I think kind of going back to one of the questions that was asked earlier about, quality versus content. I would definitely agree with a lot of my fellow panelists up here that it is definitely a balance. But one thing I will say is that one of the things that as a creative person and as somebody who's had many creative ventures in the past, one of the things that always used to stop me was almost an obsession on quality and in making sure everything was perfect from the start. And I think it's important to understand, just like LaBelle was saying, some of your earlier episodes may look different than by the time you hit that point where you're looking for sponsors or, actually saying, okay, this is actually going to be, a legitimate, business for me. And so I would definitely say that for me, the pinnacle of success is going to be when I can truly take a step back and say that, on a consistent basis, I have consistent engagement with the community. And I think that being like my major goal is really the mindset of where I came to kind of figuring out those things of, quality is super important, but you've got to start where you can start and then you'll build as you go. And so as I've built and gone on this journey, I think that's why success now to me is truly just saying, consistently really engaging with the people I want to engage with and having them engage back with me, and whether that's, 5,000 downloads or, 1,000 downloads, that consistency, I think is everything because that then leads to sustained growth.
Yeah, I like to add shortcuts leads you nowhere. You can easily, there's ways out here to make your podcast get 10,000 downloads off 2 episodes and all of that, missing all of the shortcuts. You can go into a podcast deal where you with a radio station, they own all of your content. They really do all of the work. They market it. All you got to do is record. They have a script, tell you say this, do this, be here this day. This is your guest, things of that nature. And it can be going good. You can be getting a lot of money. You can have a lot of downloads, all the clout that you need in the world, have this dope team. But when they say, okay, this not producing, you're gone, then what? Then you have nothing. So just enjoy the route. There's podcasts that I listen to, podcasts I listen to that have thousands of viewers and they sponsoring this, sponsoring that. But when you listen to that backstory, they've been doing this for 10, 15 years. And it's like, oh, well, this is my first year and I'm here. Giving yourself grace as you grow is very important for anyone. So like we all keep saying, just start. You'll make the corrections as you go. And if you're a go-getter, it's not going to discourage you when you find out that 2 months ago I was here and now I'm here. It's like, oh, I grew. I look at photos that I took 3 years ago. I'm like, oh my God, like what was I doing? People was paying me for that. And now that's how I listen to my podcast. Now, like, oh my God, I was editing like that, or people listen to me for that long. So just continue to enjoy the process and don't try to take a shortcut.
And I would also say, don't get discouraged by the mistakes that you may make. Yeah. I remember earlier on, I was interviewing a good friend of mine who is the A&R senior vice president of A&R for Warner Records. And man, we had like such a powerful conversation. It was everything that I wanted to get out of the podcast, and it didn't record. I was, I went in and I told my wife, I'm like, man, I'm done. This is over. Like I was so angry. I can even get emotional now thinking about it. So I have to like pull myself back from that place. But I was like, you know what? If I only have one episode of content, if I only have that one guest, then what am I doing it for anyway? So like, I didn't put all my eggs in that basket. So I'm like, you know what? That mistake happened and I need to move forward, because sometimes things will happen. I listened to my first episode and it sounded like my microphone was like this. And I was like, I actually put this out. And then I said, am I going to change it? Am I going to go back and re-record it and put it out there? No, I'm not going to do that, because that shows my process and my journey and the elevation that's happened since. So just don't get discouraged.
I can't tell you how just elated to hear you guys come from the heart with the struggles, the experiences that you have. I'm seeing in our chat comment, people just agreeing with you and amening the things that you guys are saying, because you are resonating on some of the challenges of getting started, or if they've gotten on the path of podcasting, the very things that you're talking about, other people are experiencing. So giving yourself grace, I believe 100% you should be doing that at all times, and not just with podcasting, but just in general life. Because life is an up and down journey. It's a roller coaster at times. And you guys are really showing us how that translates when you are there doing your podcast. I wanted to give the audience a chance to ask some questions. I was looking in the comments, don't have anything yet. I think everybody's been just truly tuned in. Guys, if you have questions, please ask them at this point. Looks like we have one from Dexter Bauman. What is the sweet spot as far as time length for a podcast?
You can go.
I'll say for me, and this is just based off of what I listen to and the patience level that I personally have. So this might not be the right answer, but 35 to 45 minutes, like no more, like hours when it's getting really, really passionate, and it's like, it's really deep, developed conversation. But I personally, 35 to 45 minutes for audio. But if you're video with guests, it could stretch a little bit longer, but audio, 35 to 45 minutes for me personally.
And to add to that, so it's like putting yourself in the thought process of a TV episode, right? So without commercials, a regular episode is about 20 minutes, and then you get 10 minutes of commercial in between. For something that's an hour long, you get about 40 minutes, and then you get 20 minutes of commercials. Right. So our brain is kind of like programmed to only have the attention span, if that. And a lot of people don't even watch TV now. That's why podcasts is becoming so popular, because people don't have time to watch television. So that's one thing. And then it's the type of information that you're offering and providing. So there's people that's very informative. There's people that just want to have a conversation. It's very informal. And then there's people that specialize in certain topics. There's people that have co-hosts. There's people that have guests. I know, me being an individual, I wouldn't want to listen to myself for an hour. That's why I stopped talking for an hour. And there's podcasts that I try to listen to myself for an hour. I'm like, oh my God, I can't do it. So that's when I made it shorter, and just thinking back towards that television, type of comparison, which 20 minutes, 40 minutes, and I try to stay around that, leave it alone. I'd rather leave people with something so they can continue to listen, instead of giving them too much and then they get tired and don't want to listen anymore.
Yeah, agreed. So our episodes are typically 20 minutes or less, and we break up episodes. So a lot of the ones that we have, right now are in 2-part series, because people's attention spans are really short, especially when we were in quarantine. Folks weren't commuting, so on the train, on the bus, et cetera, and now you're pretty much at home. So we try to keep it to about 20 minutes. I put one episode out, I think it was 3 minutes, and folks are like, you put a 3-minute episode out? You Yeah, I said what I needed to say in 3 minutes and I was done. So there's no need to drag things out if you don't need to necessarily. Our show is an interview format for the most part. So as you're editing, you'll see what's important, you'll see what needs to be said, and you want to always think about what's adding value to your audience. So don't focus so much on the length, but really about what's adding value to the audience and what can they glean from each episode that you put out.
And I like that you said you did a series. You broke it down. You can always break it down. That gives you less thinking power for your next episode down the line. It's like, okay, cool, I hit this topic. It was something. Sometimes I listen to some stuff and be like, dang, it's some points I wanted to miss. And I'm writing it down. I'm like, cool, this is another episode. We'll call this part 2, or we'll call it something completely different, but it's gonna add value to that conversation that we started, that seed that we planted. Now I've been watering it because you all listen, and then we're gonna see it blossom with the second part of the conversation. So that was a great.
And I love what Lavelle said about thinking of it like a TV show. Because that's exactly what my podcast co-host and I had to do. We were at a place where we were recording, we were sitting there, it's an interview format, and we were interviewing people for probably like 2 hours, just talking about stories and then editing that down to like an hour. And we're like, this is too much. And so we've got it down to now an episode is 30 to 45 minutes. But even within that, we always do a repeated segment that takes up about 10 minutes where we ask the person that we're interviewing these kind of rapid fire questions. And so with that, we're thinking of it as, okay, what's going to keep everyone's attention span as far as the interview? And then how can we break it up with another segment that's, kind of more rapid fire and also something that from a consistency standpoint, people can always look forward to. Oh, they always do we call them the burning questions at the end. And so, yeah, thinking of it like a TV show, how would you think of programming? What's going to keep people's attention? And, what, you look at TV shows that have a set format or a set kind of formula. And once you figure out what works, repeating that, it can also be very beneficial.
Guys, I couldn't even imagine how many people are actually looking for this information. As you guys are talking, like the questions are just firing off here in the chat. For anybody who needs to leave at 10 o'clock, you're more than welcome to. For our technical difficulties that we had in the beginning, we're going to give it 10 more extra minutes. I've been given grace to go ahead and extend it some more time and try to get some of these questions in. So let me scroll back up here. Let's see. Francine Martin wanted to know, how much time do you designate each day to your podcast? I'm not on TikTok, but I understand when you're making a TikTok for like a 15-second video, you spend like an hour putting those together. Is it something like that?
When you create your workflow, it makes life so much easier. So in the beginning, the growing pains in the beginning, again, you making an hour episodes, 2-hour episodes, you're trying to churn that baby down to an hour. You got, some people that try to get all the ums out. So now just being intentional with the producing process of knowing, hey, I don't want to say this much because when I edit this, it's a headache. And knowing that if I draw this out too long, that the post is going to be a headache. So now that I have my workflow good, it's literally recording, doing my recording. I take pictures at the timestamps of when I made some type of mistake. I created cues for myself. So when I do have guests, I share the cues with them. Like, hey, if you messed up, you want to repeat something, just leave a pause. So when I see that flat line, when I'm editing, I know that's exactly where I need to go, cut, and then replace. But from there, it's good. The actual work comes with marketing. So That's where I feel at. The podcast have become, creating the episodes become the easy part now. It's the marketing. Like, you have to figure out how can you be consistent. What's consistent for your life to post on social media? Make sure that you share the story, that you do have content. There's some people, they do subscribe to your podcast, but a lot of times they come at random hours. So it's the marketing that's the next step. And then from there, again, my process is I learn how to do this workflow stuff. Let me find someone that can help me market it. And then from there, hopefully it'll bring in more money, more sponsorship. And then I can find someone that's a producer, like a podcast manager, that can help me with script writing, that can help me with guests and all of these things. Again, outsourcing and or automating things so that I don't have to do it myself, because I do own a business. I'm working in that. I do have leadership positions I have to do. Spending 2 hours on 2 or 3 hours now creating a podcast, editing a podcast, and putting it on Anchor so it can do its thing is just the easy part now. It's how do I market this consistently? That's the issue.
Yeah, and I think that you could, I mean, that could be throughout the day that you're doing, Mark, especially if you don't have someone that's owning the marketing and your PR. To be quite honest, I've been in a meeting and I'm like, oh God, I need to post, or I need to do that. So that is what takes so much time. I love what you said about the podcast itself. That's easy. That really is my therapy now. If I can get on the mic, I got that down pat to jump on, but now to actually have to
Tell
put
people.
images, yeah, and put images out about myself and answer DMs so people can see that's actually interactive, to where I'm connecting with them, because I do a piece where I say, I need you to do the homework in my podcast, and then they do the homework, and then I have to read the homework, and then answer back to it. So just also remember, whatever you put out there, you got to hold yourself accountable that you're gonna have to do it, because people are gonna be like, hey, I put that question out there and you didn't answer it. So, just be mindful of all those things.
Absolutely. There is no way that we're going to be able to get to all the questions that we have building up here in the chat. So I will make sure that all of our guests here are able to reach out and get in contact with our panelists, because as you can see, they have a wealth of knowledge, a lot of experience behind the do's and the don'ts. And I don't know about you guys, but they got me excited to want to get started. So put my money together, because I think I'm gonna get Lavelle just to run mine and but just want to really quickly thank the African American Chamber for putting this together. Tanisha always being at the helm. Huge shout out to Bibi Bangura and to Sade Lee. They are a part of the staff, and of course Naja Hines, for having the foresight to come together and put this together for the audience at large. Again, this is part of the experience that you will get with being a part of our Leads group. So again, this is our Kissimmee Leads group that meets at 9 to 10 every other Thursday. And again, we have 3 other Leads groups, and we need individuals like yourself who are business oriented, who have the heart of giving, because we get in there and we find opportunities to give referrals and leads to each other, because we understand how important it is to work together to build that foundation of Black wealth. And the only way that we do that is coming in a space where we are solely focused on doing that. So again, if you are interested, please reach out to Bibi. I believe her information is in the chat, or to Sade Lee, her information is in the chat as well. Email them and we can give you the information on how to get connected, so you can attend one of our Leads group meetings. Bibi, are you still there with me? Can you hear me?
I am here.
Do you have any final thoughts?
I just wanted to thank everyone for showing up. It was well attended, and our panelists gave some great houses. So we're super thankful to have you all today, just sharing your world of podcasting with us. My information and Sade's information is in the chat. If you're not a member of our chamber and you're interested in joining, you can visit our website at blackcommerce.org. Or again, my information is in the chat as membership coordinator. I'm here to be a resource and a friend to all of those interested, and get connected with us and join a Leads group. So thank you so much, David, for leading this and moderating. It was awesome.
It was a lot of fun. Justin, Lavelle, Lane, and Jaslyn, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule. After learning what it takes to put a podcast together, I feel like we've taken some of that time away. But thank you for sharing the insight of what it looks like to be in that world, especially for the ones who are looking to become a part of it as well. Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much for having us
you
today, and just start.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, can I add something real fast? I really just, like, this is a personal panel for me, because I have worked with a lot of you all. Me and Justin, we chat on social media all the time. So it's like, I haven't met him yet, but it's like I met him, and exactly. And I'm looking at the beautiful headshot for Sade and B family. When I seen the people that was a part of this discussion, went off on me again. When I seen the individuals that was a part of this discussion, I was just so amped and so excited to be a part of this. And I also feel like I leveled up. because it's some amazing individuals here, and it's great to be appreciated and valued by the individuals here. Thank you all for the African American Chamber of Commerce for making this happen. David, we chat randomly all the time about the most random stuff. So you did a great job with moderating this conversation.
I do appreciate it. Hannibal, you asked a question about this podcast. Will it be saved anywhere so you can watch it later? I would definitely have to get with BB. Do you know that right off the top of your head, BB, if this will be available?
Yeah, this recording will be available, and it was such a good one. We will probably upload it to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/AACCCF. That's 3 C's. Subscribe and stay up to date with everything that we're doing. We usually put it onto our YouTube, so it'll be available soon, Hannibal.
Awesome. Well, guys, once again, thank you so much for tuning in. This has been a lot of fun, very informative. Everyone have a great rest of your day, and we look forward to seeing you in the future. Stay blessed.
All right.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.